More good news on the recovery from Brock Purdy's elbow surgery on schedule and steps it up in his throwing program in Jacksonville, of all places. And Pro Football Focus ranks the defensive backs around the NFL. Where do the 49ers show up on today's Locked On 49ers?
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all of you everydayers out there. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. We got a lot of news today, Crocker. We're going to talk Pro Football Focus rankings of the 49ers defensive back group and how that mixes in with the rest of the league. But we got a little nugget dropped on us by Tom Pelissero, and he said, quote, 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy is headed to Jacksonville today to throw the next couple of weeks with quarterback coach Will Hewitt and ortho specialist Tom Gormley. Another sign Purdy is progressing through his rehab following elbow surgery and remains on track to be ready for the 2023 season. How would you put this report on the level of 1 to 10, Croc, on excitedness for Brock Purdy's return?
You got to be super excited, especially if you're Kyle Shanahan. You know, one of my biggest things have been Kyle not being able to just have a good offseason with his quarterback. There's always just something kind of going on leading into the season, weird dynamic. Remember last year was like Trey Lance was getting all the reps, but off to the side, throwing behind the bleachers, we had Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think the closer you get with Brock Purdy returning to being his normal self, I think the more comfortable he gets and the fan base gets with the start of the season come week 1.
Really good news. I mean, it's just another checkpoint, right? Anytime there's an update with no setback is what you're looking for with Brock Purdy. This isn't a new thing. This is just on schedule for Brock Purdy. As long as you don't hear a report about a setback, that's when you start getting worried for Brock Purdy's recovery. So right now, he's still within that 6-month window. The exact 6-month window would put him at the opening weekend of the NFL season in 2023. But there's some talk that maybe it's not exactly 6 months. It's more like 6 4-week blocks, which is actually less than 6 calendar months, which you put it more like August 25th or whatever it is. So right now, he's progressing as expected and looking good to be cleared by the time the season starts. And again, we'll find out more when we get closer to it because he has to actually be cleared, and we'll see what he's doing when he's at training camp. But again, the big news here with Brock Purdy, anytime there's a Brock Purdy update, was there a setback? And as long as there's no setbacks and he's hitting every checkpoint he needs to, that is good news for Purdy. It's good news for the San Francisco 49ers. So, I still doubt he plays any preseason games, but there is a chance he's doing something at training camp, and I can't wait to see what exactly that is.
Sounds like right now, and again, I'm not Crocker MD, I ain't no doctor or anything like that, but sounds like it's kind of pretty smooth sailing for Brock Purdy from here on out, right? Like right now, it has nothing to do with the actual healing of the elbow. Now it's just getting everything prepared for him to go full go with throwing. So I think the actual recovery process in the sense of the surgery and everything going back to normal, I think that's good. Now it's just, all right, throwing a football harder and harder and going from there. So as far as setbacks, I'd be shocked if there's any setback from here moving forward.
Oh, Dr. Crocky in the house. I like
Dr. Crocky.
I mean, he is the doctor of drip, but I didn't realize you were so good with your ligaments too. Yeah, so that's the way I understand it as well, though. Like the healing part of the ligament is over, and obviously you don't want to strain it because there needs to be a lot of strengthening that happens, and then you have to ramp up your throwing program, and that's where he is right now, and that's why he's with a QB coach and an ortho specialist at the same time during this period because he's at the ramp up stage of his throwing program. So. That is exciting stuff. And I can't wait to see what he looks like once he does start throwing. Is there a little more for Brock Purdy? I'm sure he's been strengthening a ton of things, and there are probably some muscle groups and some places in his body that are going to be even stronger than they were before. Does that mean he gets a little tick of extra velocity, which could be huge for someone like Brock Purdy? And on the other side of it, does he get back to where he was? Because that would be huge in the wrong direction if he doesn't quite have as much velocity as he used to have on his throws. And how long will it take to be 100%? Like, I wonder if there's like, okay, you're cleared, but your arm strength isn't quite all the way to where it's going to be for another couple months. That would be interesting too.
Well, we might have to have Will Hewitt on then. And, I've had him on my YouTube channel, so maybe he'll come on here and talk about it. I know one thing that he did discuss with us before was that Brock's his throwing velocity before working with him for combine prep, it wasn't great. And he actually improved it like, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles per hour. So if there is anyone that probably can help him start to kind of get that velocity back that he had, and maybe even a little bit more, it's Will Hewitt. And he's an Aussie. So
okay.
He's an Aussie, and he correlated like throwing with something else. I got to go back and watch it. We had him on some months ago, but really good, great, insightful guy. And the work that he did with Brock Purdy, it was pretty legit heading into the draft process. And I think moving forward, of course, if you're Brock Purdy, it's like, let me keep working with the guy that truly helped me out in the draft process.
Well, maybe they can turn over some couch cushions and find another 5 miles per hour in there this time when he works with Coach Hewlett. that would be fantastic for Brock Purdy.
Right.
Yeah, we got to get.
Can we talk about a little bit the importance of that? Because I think a lot of people think of having a big arm and throwing the ball down the field, and that's not necessarily what we care about. It's just it's really the velocity part, the ball traveling from point A to point B as quickly as possible, especially on some of those drive throws where he excelled in that 10 to 20 yard range. But can he excel in 10 to 20 yards in tight windows? And that's where you need the velocity. So obviously Kyle Shanahan's offense doesn't call for him to need to have that all the time. But if there are those times where, man, he needs that extra little oomph on the ball so that it doesn't hang for a defender to kind of get there and hit a guy in the chest, then that extra, little velocity would truly help. Even driving the out route. Again, being able to do certain things with, and again, it's so funny because we hear you don't gotta have a big arm, and it's like, you don't until you do. And there was a throw that he really got in trouble with, and I'm pretty sure 99% of people overlooked it, but I was actually at the game and I was watching it from end zone view against Washington, and he threw this quick out route to Brandon Ayuk, and the ball like fought back inside, but he didn't have like his feet underneath him, so he kind of had to use all upper body, and the ball kind of hung on a quick out. And I was like, oh, that was kind of ugly. Like, that's kind of worrisome. But if you add a little bit of velocity to it, and that's the part where the guys that just have bigger arms, they can fire that out there without having their feet underneath him, as opposed to somebody like Purdy who might need a little bit more of his feet under him to drive that out. So that's where having the bigger arm will really help him. And if he does that, then we're talking about him truly taking his game to the next level.
Yeah, well, yeah, it opens up the ceiling, and you're exactly right there. It's not about the timing stuff and the short to intermediate, and Brock Purdy's fine there. And when his cleats are all on the ground, he's got good zip on it. He's really good throwing on the move. But it's like when you're running left, trying to throw back to the right, or when you're kind of things are a little bit awkward with your lower half, can you get that ball out there? We've seen some weird balls float for him. Deep outs and the far hash and the far sideline when you're on the right hash or versus left half or whatever, back and forth.
Those are touchdown to Brandon Ayuk, right, where it was a double move. He's about to get hit. He launches the ball out there as he's getting hit, and the ball ends up, I don't know what, 5 yards short. Ayuk had to stop, turn around, catch the ball. He was so wide open though. But imagine if he wasn't as wide open, but because of the pressure, you have to throw regardless. What would that have looked like? And if you have a slightly stronger arm to just be able to muscle that out there a little bit more with your upper body while not being able to step in because somebody's about to hit you, that's where the arm strength comes into play. So again, it's not on a 100%. You just got to have this big arm.
Right.
I always like to say, man, you don't need it till you need it. And there are certain instances where he got a little lucky. And shoot, the throw to Juwan Jennings, he had a lot of luck. That's why there's some people with some of his areas of where he was throwing the ball where it's like, it might not quite be that good again. But Juwan Jennings, there's a play against Tariq Woolen. It was a play action. And everybody keeps talking about, oh, you got burned. Tariq Woolen got burned. First of all, it was a play action. And Tariq Woolen stepped up, and all of a sudden, Juwan Jennings is behind him. But man, Brock Purdy threw that ball inside, and it's like, you know, that's when you need the bigger arm, right? Because if the safety's eyeing that, that's an interception. Luckily, Diggs was going for the man and not the ball. That ball needs to be outside, and that's where the bigger arm comes into play. That deep over, that interception he threw against the Raiders, right, where he didn't get his lucky on that one, where they tried to run that little route, and all he had to do was throw it to the open area, but he just couldn't get enough on it. So, again, the big arm, you don't need it until you need it, and if he's able to work and just improve that velocity or arm strength a little bit more, now you're cooking with hot grease because he already played exceptionally well last year.
Absolutely, absolutely, and for sure he can't really afford to lose much velocity if that's what is the end result of this whole elbow surgery. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that, keeping an eye on what he's doing at training camp and when he's hitting more of his checkpoints as he gets ready for action to be cleared for the 2023 season. Everything looking good for Brock Purdy. Let's talk defensive backs. Where does Pro Football Focus rank the 49ers defensive back groups 1 through 32 in the NFL next? Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel. Baseball season is here. It's in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on all of that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is right. You heard me correctly. Up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on to join today, and you will find tons of daily specials at FanDuel. I love the ability to create your own parlays and just how easy it is to utilize the app, how easy it is to use the website at FanDuel and really build any kind of bet that you want with any sport. NBA season's over, tons of NBA bets to be made. NHL season's over now, tons of NHL season bets to be made. Of course, baseball all summer long, and you can bet on any week already. There are lines for the NFL season, rookies of the year, coaches of the year, Super Bowl champions, 49ers over under 10.5 wins. Don't miss your chance to snag that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, here we go. Pro Football Focus. We talked about the offensive line ranks, and it might have been a little disrespectful, but I understood where they're coming from with the 49ers offensive line rankings. And I was actually, Croc, a little pleasantly surprised how high they had the 49ers defensive backs ranked. Because when you look at this group, and this is with Miles Hartfield being the player that they sort of projected as the starting nickel in the defense. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, although he's competing there for a job as a nickel safety, do it all special teams sort of a player. And we'll see if Miles Hartfield, the free agent they brought in from Steve Wilkes' Carolina Panthers secondary, is able to make the team. But Charvarius,
why do you think it's Hartfield? Because they go off of a lot of analytical stuff. I wonder if there's something in there where he either translates better than Isaiah Oliver. Is there a chance? I know how high they are on Oliver, so I'd assume Oliver's the guy. But it's just interesting that PFF went that route with it.
Yeah, I wonder if he had I don't have the grades in front of me right now. I wonder if he had like a little better grade, maybe in the nickel. Maybe they just, he signed first, so they had him sort of penciled in there because the Oliver signing happened after Hartsfield, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Hartsfield was the first person to sign after Hargrave, right, for the 49ers. So maybe that's why. I'm not sure, but I think we know exactly who the other four starters, and we know who the nickel's going to be. It's going to be Isaiah Oliver. We've heard it from the team. Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Tashawn Gibson, and Talanoa Hufanga. And even though Talanoa Hufanga was a first-team All-Pro last year, I'm a little bit surprised that that PFF gave the 49ers a top 10 defensive back unit here. They actually were ranked 9th in the entire league. So I thought that was solid. And here's why, and it's because the Niners secondary combined to earn an 84.6 coverage grade last season, the 4th best mark in the league, even though guys like Jimmy Ward departed in free agency, and they also lost defensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans to the head coach job in Houston. They did go on to say the nickel corner third safety rolls up for grabs, but still strong unit that was tough to pass on in 2022, and it should be solid again in 2023. So that's what they had to say about the San Francisco 49ers defensive back group, and you can go find the whole write-up at pff.com about where they rank everybody in the league. Croc, do you like the 9 ranking? Do you think they could go higher? Do you think they could go lower? What do you think overall about this defensive back group for the 49ers this year?
Well, you had me guess where I thought they were. What I say, 13?
I think you said 13 or 14. And I thought they might have actually been like the offensive line where it was even a little bit lower than that. So they actually really like, and look, it's been hard to pass on the 49ers, but how much of that is on the defensive line and how good they are up front, how good the linebackers are in coverage. So do the 49ers play up because their jobs might be a little bit easier than some other jobs for some other defensive backs around the league?
Well, that was the interesting part, and I kind of like raised my hand because that was the first thought in my head. I did not think the defensive line was good last season. I thought that defensive line went as Bosa went, so it was really a whole lot of Bosa, or I don't want to say nothing.
Nick Bosa and the Tips.
Yeah, I mean, it was they were leaning heavily on Bosa. So obviously he's terrific and he's going to wreck some stuff. But if there's a play where he's kind of slow to get there, which happens all the time for defensive linemen, no matter who you are, unless you're like Prime Von Miller, he was a menace. But no matter who you are, it's going to take. They're going to get you sometimes. Well, quarterbacks had a little bit more time, and for the secondary to hold up the way that they did, I like that because a lot of people have been very disrespectful to the 49ers secondary, no matter who's been back there over the last few years. And I keep saying, it's not as bad as y'all think. It's not as bad as y'all think. They've gotten a lot of good play out of guys. And I didn't know if it was D'Amico Ryans or Robert Saleh just putting guys in like really good situations. And obviously, 2019, that's an outlier with that pass rush. But outside of that, the pass rush, is fairly normal, especially last year. And they still play extremely well. So put some respect on the 49ers DBs. Put some respect on Diamador Lenore, who everybody in that mom is trying to replace. All right. And Travarius Ward, he's the one that Travarius Ward is the interesting one to me because I think he's very specific with what he's good at. And he's really more of a press guy, in your face, guarding big body guys. When he's not guarding those type of guys, I think he's a little bit vulnerable in coverage. And I don't think his turn and run is too great when they have him playing off. So I'm actually not worried because I clearly understand what his strength is, but I'm more interested to see like just how does he consistently play next year as opposed to Diamador Lenore. I think I know exactly what I'm getting out of Lenore. I think he's a solid starter. Ward, how do they use him? If they use him at the line of scrimmage more, I think he'll be terrific. But for some reason, he tended to play a little bit of off coverage last year, which I wasn't so much a fan of. That's Emmanuel Mosley. That's what he did well.
I think with Ward, it was the beginning of the year. He played a lot. He dealt with some minor injuries. I wonder if they were nagging for him because it seemed like the end of the year, teams are actually going at him more and had more success on his side than actually Diamador and Lenore. Because remember when Lenore had kind of a rough patch. And then all of a sudden, Lenore started making plays because teams were throwing at him. He's like, all right, I'm going to take the ball away then, and I love the mentality and I love the way he played. But then teams kind of started having more success even on the other side against Ward later in the season.
I think with Lenore, it was Washington and then the Raiders. And it was kind of like back to back. He had a rough go in those 2 games. But outside of that, I thought he played well throughout the year.
Yeah,
so I think the more he gains confidence and understands exactly what it is that they want him to do, and that, hey, if something does bad happen, I don't have to look over my shoulder and see another DB running in. I think that helps you play a little bit more confident, a little bit more loose as well.
I can't wait to see what Isaiah Oliver looks like in the slot because I remember him coming out of school and I watched him early in his career as an outside corner, and he was a player I really liked for the 49ers. In fact, that was the Dante Pettis. He was my shadow 49ers pick for the Dante Pettis selection, that second round in 2018. Really thought he was a great fit for what the 49ers did, and he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't really that good for the Falcons on the outside. Kind of took off as a nickel corner, but he's not built like your traditional nickel corner. And usually when a guy is over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds, and you move inside from corner, you move to safety. And so I'm surprised he actually ended up being a nickel. So he matches up really well with the big nickel with tight ends and players like that. But I'm really curious to see him against the quicker, smaller slot variety of receivers in the NFL. So that's fascinating to me as well, because if you just saw the 49ers, you're like, here's your 5 defensive backs, you would say, well, that guy's either a safety or an outside corner when you're looking at Oliver, and you'd say Diamador Lenore is probably the nickel guy, but they're going to be flipped in this defense.
Right. And Diamador Lenore is the one that ended up starting in the nickel. And now they're like, no, we want you to just play outside and we're going to have Oliver inside. It's kind of reminiscent of Carlos Rogers. Remember, Rogers came over, he was an outside guy, then he kind of slid inside, and he would definitely play in the slot in nickel situations. And he was a bigger nickel. You didn't see a whole lot of that. And that was kind of unique even to that team, because they had other guys who I actually thought played well. Cox, remember Cox? He was number 20. That he came in, he played well. There were some other nickels that they had during that time as well, but Carlos Rogers ended up being the guy that really kind of held it down.
I wonder is it a little clue to how the 49ers are going to play? Maybe more nickel, want a little bigger nickel slot corner to be able to defend the run better. We've seen guys like Jalen Ramsey recently play a lot more in that position, almost like a star player for the 49ers. I wonder if that's the idea, that it's almost like a 3 safety look, but it's a bigger corner. They could probably use Jair Alexander in that role as well if they want, or Jair Brown if they wanted to use a safety, a third safety on the field as well. You could put Brown back, you could put Hufanga there. So there's a lot of things they could do if that's the look, especially letting Al-Shaair walk. Are they going to go more 2 linebacker, 5 DB looks, even in their base defense?
Well, you got some speed in Winters, so I'm curious to see if Winters get on the field, and he might be someone that allows you to play a little bit more coverage with linebackers out in space, just his ability to kind of chase and pursue, even though I think he's still more of a downhill player. Like, even if it's running at a 45-degree angle downhill, I don't know how much you want him moving back and having to cover. That's still something that it wasn't a huge responsibility for him at TCU, but he's a guy I wonder if he allows him to play more base, almost like reminiscent of the Seattle Seahawks for a lot of years. Seahawks, there was a time where I felt like they didn't come out of their base defense. They just kept their linebackers on the field. They knew exactly their job. They had Cam Chancellor out there playing that, role that he played. And then you had Earl Thomas and obviously the corners with Maxwell and Sherman on the outside. They didn't change up what they were doing. And I wonder if 49ers potentially can go towards that. But again, I don't think you sign Isaiah Oliver to not use him on the field a lot.
49ers top 10 defensive back unit in the NFL. Let us know what you think. Where do you think the 49ers should rank there, and how good could they be on the back end in 2023? Next, I want to talk about Nick Bosa's contract projection and a storyline that nobody's really talking about surrounding the 49ers approaching training camp. Next. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are subscribed up, become an everydayer on YouTube or wherever you prefer to get your podcasts, and check out the rest of what the network has to offer, like the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson breaking down the entire league daily right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So I urge folks out there to go back, because our guy Brad Spielberger, speaking of Pro Football Focus, we did a whole episode with him projecting what the contract was going to look like this offseason for Nick Bosa. And I did see a tweet recently, and they've been putting out a lot of content at PFF recently about what that projected contract is going to look like for Nick Bosa for the 49ers. And, $33.5 million per year is what that projection is. 5 years, $167.5 million. Again, that's from Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus. Does a fantastic job, formerly of, and I think he does still do some work with overthecap.com, who is the best in the business doing that cap stuff. So Nick Bosa, he was at voluntary mini camp, right? He was not at OTAs. He was doing his thing back at his home studio, his home gym in Florida. But Croc, this is too big of a contract. I can't imagine that Nick Bosa shows up to training camp without this deal being done. So right now at 49ers HQ, this is project number 1, getting Nick Bosa's contract done. And this is potentially something we saw with his brother. Remember when his brother was drafted and there was that contract dispute something
Yeah.
like minors about offsets or something like that. The Bosas have been around. They're not going to get taken advantage of either. So Nick Bosa is he's going to compete with this contract, and this is a big one. And the 49ers need to get him signed so he can get his butt into camp by at least day 2 or day 3, even if he misses day 1, which tends to happen sometimes. So it'll be interesting. Niners done a good job. There was Kittle, then it was Warner, then it was Debo, and no matter how much hand-wringing, and there was a lot more drama last year with Debo, but they got those contracts done. Have a feeling they'll get it done with Bosa, but no one's really talking about it. Like, he's not going to show up if that deal's not done.
$33.5 million annually is a lot of money for a non-quarterback.
And you know what? I think Brad Spielberger might have upped that a little bit from when he was on the podcast in I think it was February when we had him on. And I know he said it's going to go over 30, but I think he said more like 32. But I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, 30.
What I'm looking at right now from him is 33.5.
And that was before free agency. So numbers I'm sure some numbers went up since then. Although I can't think of, like, the Niners signed the highest paid defensive lineman in free agency. So there's no new deals done there. But I mean, whatever it is, Nick Bosa is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, or he's not going to be in camp.
You go back a few years, and I say a few years because it seems like it was 3 years ago when the 49ers originally signed Jimmy Garoppolo, but it was really more like 5-6 years. Crazy, right? Like how fast time flies. He was the highest paid player in the NFL for a little bit at like $27 million a year.
Highest paid player in NFL history, Jimmy Garoppolo.
At 27. So now we're, fast forward some years, and we're not even talking about a quarterback because they're making $500 million. We're talking about an edge rusher making 33.5, and he's worth it. So what do? You just got to pay him. I talked about last year. It felt like it was Bosa and the crew, right? Like it was the D-line kind of went as Bosa goes. And 49ers, they gave up a lot for Trey Lance, to get Trey Lance. And luckily for the 49ers, they've done a terrific job of just winning regardless. And then if you hit on Purdy, I mean, that's an even bigger win. But where you do kind of lose is for the last couple of years, you just haven't had first round picks. So, and now that would be three years that you just don't have guys to go towards edge rusher, go towards offensive tackle, some of these impactful positions, even though it would have been late picks, but maybe you could have had a trade up from there to get a guy that you saw kind of falling as an edge rusher and whatnot. So that's where it kind of hurts. I feel like Bosa doesn't have help, and because of these guys starting to get paid, Debo just got paid. Kittle's one of the highest paid tight ends in the league. You paid Trent Williams. You paid Fred Warner. I mean, they're all getting paid, right? So you got to draft very well to help offset some of this money right here, $33.5 million annually for Nick Bosa. And I think that's where, although he's worth it, it can kind of hurt them a little bit because it's all on you. You can't get hurt.
You can't get hurt. And I know we made jokes about Jimmy W, right? Jimmy Garoppolo and all the wins in the quarterback wins stat. But if you look at the 49ers since 2019, there's a lot of Bosa wins there. And if you look at how the team goes, he was hurt in 2020. They were not good. He wasn't on the team yet in 2018. They were not good. He was on the team and healthy in 2019, 2021, and 2022. And where'd the 49ers go those 3 years?
Minimum NFC championship game.
He's the most important player on the football team. So get him signed, and by God, stay healthy, Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
Now I've got myself worked up about a Bosa contract because it's something that nobody's really talking about out there. It's like, man, it's not like he's not going to play this year or anything crazy, but what if there's some dispute? Like, got to get Bosa in camp, got to get him in camp, got to get him signed. And it's going to change the trajectory of the team. And they're not going to be able to pay. Things are going to change in subsequent off seasons, starting this coming off season. Like, this is a huge window for the 49ers to have as many of their stars together right now, because you've got age for Trent Williams. He was contemplating retirement already. He's not going to play for 5 more years, right? He might play for 1 or 2 more years. I have no idea. Maybe this is his last year. I'm not sure. You got the IU contract that needs to be done. Juwan Jennings is a free agent too. They're not going to sign both those guys. One of those guys is going to go. Do they trade Juwan Jennings? Do they trade Ayuk next offseason and sign Jennings for a lot less? Do they potentially trade Deebo Samuel, right? There's going to be changes. George Kittle is on the wrong side of 30 now. Guys are getting really expensive, like Nick Bosa, and those contracts are going up for those other contracts they've already signed with Debo and Warner and who else? George Kittle, right? So there's less money to spend elsewhere. So they're going to have to let everybody walk that becomes a free agent, and you can only pay a certain caliber of player, a certain style of player. You can't really bring a lot of free agents in. They'll be able to do what they need to do, I'm sure, and operate. Just because you sign one guy and Nick Bosa doesn't mean you can't do anything else, like that, But they're going to have a huge portion of their salary cap with their star players, and so having the right quarterback that's not too expensive, not feeling the need to go out and get Kirk Cousins next offseason, right? So really interesting time for the 49ers this year. This is their most talented year probably in this era. And it's not going to be and it's going to be more talented than last year. It's going to be more talented than 2019, and it's going to be more talented the next year, which is the key. I don't think they're going to be better next year than they are this year.
I think heading into 2020, that might have been the most talented. Now they just had a plethora of injuries. Everybody just got hurt.
Injury-plagued COVID year, yeah.
Yeah, but heading into the season, that might have been the most.
I'll take this squad. I'll take 2023. I think potentially better at quarterback, definitely better at running back.
Oh yeah, I'm forgetting about running back. Who's running back? Yeah.
That's the other thing. Is McCaffrey going to play 20 games again? If there was a prop at FanDuel, I would bet against any running back playing 20 games, especially a guy who just played 20 games last year. I mean, that's tough. He was banged up. Did you hear Greg Papa talking about how he didn't think Christian McCaffrey was going to be able to play in the NFC Championship game?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was hurt more than I think we realized at the end of the year.
Was calf, I believe.
Yeah, it was calf and shin or something. It was. I know there was a calf, but there might have been more. I always wondered that, man. There's so much stuff going on with injuries with NFL players that I don't think we fully know about. We know about the things we're allowed to know about, I think.
Well, I can tell when he ran through four guys and
that was the play. That was like the play where it's like, oh my God, is Christian McCaffrey going to keep the 49ers in this game without Brock Purdy? And then second half, then you lose Josh Johnson. It's like, all right, well, unless he plays quarterback and wins it for him, then there's no chance anymore. But that was an amazing run. And the 49ers were close. Go back and watch that game, you forget how close they were still at halftime.
The defense started pressing. That's what it was. So you started getting some kind of uncharacteristic penalties. They knew, like, all right, it's on us to win the game. And I think they were trying to make a play, and they pressed a little bit, and I think that's what happened, because that was kind of really how the game got away from them. There were just these penalty aided drives for the Eagles, on top of a fumble right before the halftime by Josh Johnson and things like that really helped them. So
yeah. All right, we are coming back tomorrow. We've got another Winky Wednesday. I do appreciate everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Croc and I back tomorrow. Locked On 49ers.